order at 6 o'clock p.m. Can I get a roll call?
Chair Andrew Carr.
Here.
Nicole Hendricks. Ron Heberlein.
Here.
Matt Constantine. Sam Skull.
Here.
Jennifer Willard. Yana Semenova. Here. Thank you.
Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This is the time that a citizen has the opportunity to address the Planning Commission regarding any item that is not already scheduled for a formal public hearing or a public work session tonight. Therefore, if any member of the audience, either here in City Hall or via Zoom, would like to speak about any other matter of concern, please raise your hand or send a message to the recorder using the Zoom chat function so that we may hear from you now. If you have not already, please fill out a testimony card and give it to the clerk. Also, please state your name and address for the record, or state that your address is as provided on the testimony card. Please come to the podium when you are called forward, or unmute yourself on Zoom if the clerk requests. And please limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes. Is there anyone who would like to testify at this time?
I currently have 0 hands raised on Zoom.
Hands raised on Zoom. Great. Okay, next agenda item then is administrative matter, consideration of the May 8th, 2024 minutes that were previously distributed. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Okay, I noted one change on page 3. Dan, would you like to add the clarifying on that? Or?
So at the top of page 3, it currently says ADU sized units would count as middle housing, but a small home, period. So between home and period, the words would not should be added.
All right, thank you. So do I have a motion to amend and adopt the minutes?
I'll make a motion to amend and adopt the minutes.
I'll second.
Okay, a motion and a second has been, any questions on the corrections or the minutes? Nope. Okay, please do a vote. What? Voice vote. Okay, thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say nay. And it passes 5-0. Moving on to the next agenda item is a work session for annual housing report. This work session is a chance for the Planning Commission to gain additional understanding of and provide guidance on ongoing legislative projects prior to a public hearing. As a courtesy, the Planning Commission will, as time permits, allow for limited public comment on the topic. After staff have presented their report, for the Commission's purpose of continuing to understand the project. However, it should be noted that it is not a public hearing, and any participants are encouraged to participate in a full public hearing for legal standing purposes. At this time, I call for city staff to present information they have prepared for the work session. Will city staff please present?
Chair Carr and Commissioners, if I may, my name is Miranda Bateshall, Planning Director for the City of Wilsonville. I'd like to take just a second to introduce Ms. Perlman, Assistant Planner with the City of Wilsonville, and this project, especially since we have a few newer commissioners who have not actually had one of these report outs before. I think it would be nice to give a little bit of the history behind this project. So in 2014, the city conducted a residential land study, adopted that. That was part of our Goal 10 needed housing compliance with the state. And so that's a project that's done typically with periodic review or every so often to look at your residential need, the need for houses, housing units, housing types, your residential need in your city, and then also compare that to your buildable lands in the city and what capacity you have to provide those needed housing types. So as all of you are aware, we are actually undertaking that work again right now in the Housing Our Future project that has come in front of you and that Commissioner Willard is helping us with. But the last time we essentially did that work was back in 2013 and adopting that residential land study in 2014. One of the key outcomes of that was the city has historically been growing faster than the regional projections, and also that there might be the potential, depending on how we grow and how quickly we grow and where we grow, that we might not have sufficient land in the 20-year land supply in order to provide the housing we need to provide. And so multiple recommendations and strategies came out of that work. One was to look at the redevelopment of town center and the vision behind that and whether that would add additional residential capacity and to do a plan for that. It was to look at the Frog Pond, do the planning for Frog Pond West, East, and South, and look at bringing that land into the urban growth boundary. And there were a number of recommendations. One of the key recommendations was for the city to actually begin doing an annual housing report and track what our actual housing development is and track the activity, both in terms of what are we permitting every year, but also what are we entitling every year. So, and how does that compare to our land supply? So how much of the land are we essentially approving development on, and what is the efficiency use of that, and are we how are we essentially performing in relationship to that residential buildable land, the capacity that we've assumed, and the need that we have? And so we did our first annual housing report in 2015, which published data on the 2014 year. So essentially every year we're reporting on the prior year. And here we are. I can't believe I'm saying this. In 2024, reporting on 2023, so I think that's 9 years of data now, which is pretty incredible. We don't know, when we started this project, it was on a cute little printout PDF done in, I think, Publisher. Not cute, but we did the best that we could with the tools that we had. And as you're going to see presented tonight, my staff have developed new tools, new reporting mechanisms, and we've expanded substantially what we're reporting out. So we have information now on affordability, we have information on comparables to neighboring jurisdictions, and tonight I think part of this report will also go over some of our newest kind of tracking of accessibility within our housing. So I'm excited to hear the presentation tonight. I'll be interested to see how all of you respond to this, especially in light of the work we're doing on the new project, and also just kind of where we're at in terms of reporting in comparison to where we've been. There's always additional work we can wrap into this, and so we're excited to hear your thoughts if you do have additional data points you think will be helpful moving forward in future housing reports. So with that, I just wanted to give some of the background of where that project was born from. It'll probably become increasingly more important in terms of us having done this work and continuing to do this work as we head into new state law around the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis and the fact that the state will be doing a dashboard of production and a dashboard of targets for cities throughout the state. So it'll be interesting to see how, our information can be provided to them as they're doing that work, and how it compares. when we started this work, no other cities were doing this, and I'm not sure of any that are, but they may start to based on this, the new legislation. So anyway, with that, I've already said enough. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'll hand it over to Ms. Perlman.
Thank you so much, and good evening, Chair Carr and Planning Commission members. As Miranda said, my name is Sarah Perlman. I'm the Assistant Planner with the city, and it is my absolute pleasure to present the 2023 Wilsonville Annual Housing Report tonight. And so we're just going to scroll through this. And we'll start off with just some kind of overview activity for the year. In 2023, 114 homes were permitted for construction. You can see kind of the breakdown of the types of homes that were permitted, majority single family, but with some townhouses and an ADU. In terms of approved plans, the DRB approved 114 apartments with the Town Center mixed-use development project, and an 11-lot subdivision with an anticipated 21 units, including middle housing in Frog Pond, and an SROZ large lot exception for one additional unit. A last data point of overview, the population in 2023 grew by about 0.8%, and the number of housing units grew by 1%. Kind of interestingly, housing grew a bit faster than population in the past year, which is not always the case. And so we'll kind of see how that comes into play throughout the report as well. As Miranda mentioned earlier, the report this year explores mobility-friendly housing as a uniting theme. And I know this is a pretty timely topic, given the interest by City Council and the community, as well as the focus of mobility-friendly housing in Frog Pond East and South. So based on data from the American Community Survey, approximately 7.2% of Wilsonville's population have a mobility-related disability. The city would generally probably like to see at least, or really more than 7.2% of housing units be mobility friendly, as some of those units would be occupied with those who choose the unit for other reasons. And so to get a sense of mobility readiness, mobility friendliness of Wilsonville's newer homes, staff conducted a visual driving survey as well as an examination of approved plans in Frog Pond West, Claremont, and Villebois Village Center. We found that in Frog Pond West, approximately 12.5% of homes could be considered mobility friendly, and that was defined in this snapshot as having one or a few steps leading to the entrance that could easily be converted to a ramp. Some two-story homes were included that had the option for ground floor or single-story living, and ground floor or elevator served kind of apartment-style or condo-style homes were included as well. And so you can kind of see an example here of one of the homes in Frog Pond West. In Claremont, approximately 9.1% of homes could be considered mobility friendly. There were more than that were single story, but many had a number of steps leading to the entrance that would be much harder to convert to a ramp. So those were excluded from the data. And then in Villebois Village Center, approximately 61.2% of multifamily style homes were mobility friendly. So there's a nice example here from the Alexan or Domain at Villebois, and not in Villebois Village Center, but a nice example of some ground floor homes. And we're going to zoom back out for just a minute here to look at some of the locations and numbers of permitted homes. This map shows those data points for 2023, along with some additional information regarding size of lots, home size, density. We can also see that data for 2014 to 2023 to kind of get a sense of where those centers of development are. And then a kind of fun way to look at it is this heat map, where you can see that Villebois in the past 9 years has been a pretty hot spot for development, but you can definitely see Frog Pond heating up as well. And then my final map here is showing development approvals since 2014. All of these maps are interactive. You can click on the individual points and it'll take you to web pages for more information, which is a pretty nifty component of it. So we're going to kind of start to dig into affordability and growth. So as I had mentioned earlier, this past year, housing unit growth marginally outpaced population growth, but housing prices have continued to rise. So the median sales price of a home in 2023 was $624,618. It's a 10% increase from the 2022 price, but kind of interestingly, just under the 2021 price. And in this chart, you can see the estimated affordable home price. So this is the estimated price that a household making the median income can afford if they're paying no more than 30% of their income to housing costs. And we can also see that, or I guess just some background, the estimated monthly mortgage payment is based on assumptions of a 20% down payment, 30-year term, and it factors in the expected property taxes and the interest rate of that year. The median home cost in 2023 was 89% more than what a household making the median income could reasonably afford. And just to pop back to our other chart here, I think it illustrates well that the gap between what's affordable and the actual price of a home has been widening since 2020. This may be in part due to interest rates that began to rise in the past few years and have continued to stay high. At the same time, income has continued to rise, and this is a kind of interesting figure in that it shows notable fluctuations in the median sales price, how it's changed relative to the fairly stable income increase. The kind of fluctuations start in 2021 and have continued, although a little less in 2023. And I think just a note on this chart, it doesn't really show the impact of interest rates on actual costs. It really just looks at like the sticker price, what the home cost at the end. We're going to dig into rent here. The median rent also increased by about 2.1% from 2022. It was $1,733 per month in 2023. This median rent continued to exceed what a household making the median income could afford if they're paying 30% of their income to rent. This table shows that the actual and estimated affordable rent prices, kind of interestingly, in 2019 and 2020 were much more closely aligned than that relationship between actual and affordable rent in 2021 to 2023. And this gives a general sense that the median Wilsonville renter continues to be rent burdened in 2023. We can see that income for homeowners and renters alike rose last year, but for renters as well, that gap between what rent costs and what's affordable began really in 2021, but remained steady in 2023. So we're going to use some data from the American Community Survey to break down that cost and rent burden question just a little bit further. And I'll see if I can get these, maybe not both on one page, but we can see that nearly all households earning less than $20,000 per year. This shows all households. We also have renters. Most of those folks were cost burdened, so spending more than 30% of their income on housing. A majority share of households, both the aggregated data and just renters earning less than $75,000 per year, were cost burdened. And the trend is generally more pronounced in renting households in those middle income groups than the aggregated data. That's true for everything except for the lowest income group, which nearly all are house burdened or cost burdened, and the highest income group, where a much smaller percentage are cost burdened. A quick note, the state each year puts together a list of cities with populations over 10,000 who are severely rent burdened, meaning renters are paying more than 50% of their income towards rent. Wilsonville was included on the list for the first time in 2022, but was included again in 2023. Approximately 28.8% of Wilsonville renters experience severe rent burden. And for the first time, this year's housing report touches on houselessness and transitory housing. New state laws required cities to establish compassionate protections for people experiencing houselessness. So in response, the city designated a portion of the City Hall parking lot for vehicle camping, and the city-owned parcel just north of City Hall for tent camping. Those sites were designated in July 2023, and since then, the city has observed generally about 2 to 4 vehicles and 1 tent using those spaces. And then based on some survey work done last year, approximately on the low end, 167 to on the high end, 173 estimated people either stay long-term or regularly stay in local hotels and motels. It's generally as finances allow or as needed. This data includes but is not limited to those experiencing houselessness. It also likely accounts for contractors who are in town for work, and those in need of temporary shelter due to other factors like their home having work done or family events, things like that. And then in terms of thinking about needs, we'll bounce back a little bit to talk about some housing mix. And so approximately 67% of Wilsonville's households consisted of 1 to 2 people in 2023. This exceeds the share of studio and 1-bedroom units, which are approximately 16% of the housing stock. This may indicate a need for housing units with fewer bedrooms. There's some interesting data in here as well, just about how this mix has changed over time in terms of household size and unit type. And then to get a sense, about 45% of housing units in Wilsonville are apartments, and 44.3% of housing units are detached single family. Townhouses make up the next largest portion, and we're expecting more cluster housing, duplexes, those kinds of middle housing, as well as ADUs in the coming years. And then, as mentioned earlier, the report looks at similar communities at kind of a high level, so I'll just touch on that data briefly. Wilsonville generally remains consistent with cohort cities in terms of median home sales price, as shown in this figure, rent burden, as shown here, and severe rent burden. This indicates broadly that these issues are faced by similar cities and across the region. Wilsonville, over time, has remained consistent with population and housing growth. Wilsonville's consistently been one of the fastest growing cities, and while not the fastest growing city this year, you can see the trend over time of population growth. Housing growth has also been fairly steady over the years when compared to cohort cities. To give a forward-looking sense, since Metro's housing growth forecast in 2014, about 55% of the project growth in housing units has been constructed, kind of on track for a midpoint of those 20 years. And then in terms of buildable land, 68% of residential land inventoried in 2014 has been dedicated to approved plans. When the 2018 UGB expansion is added, which is about 275 acres, that number goes to 43% of the available residential land in the city being dedicated. So I am looking forward to hearing your thoughts. I'll just give a couple closing conclusions here. Housing affordability and availability continue to be issues facing many communities across the Portland metro region and the nation. Interest rates have contributed. They've risen and remained high this past year, likely a factor in the rising cost and cost burden. This year's report also, as we discussed, aims to begin to respond to the call for understanding accessibility and visibility of homes identified originally in the Equitable Housing Strategic Plan. And encouragingly, a significant portion of the apartment and condo style homes could be considered mobility friendly in Vilbois Village Center. And the ratio of single family homes that meet the criteria for mobility friendliness in Frog Pond West and Claremont surpassed 7.2%, that estimated population living with a mobility-related disability. This year, we're expecting to see more transformations in Town Center with last year's approvals, more development in Frog Pond and infill throughout the city. As we all are aware, housing needs are multifaceted, and so it's exciting to see the continued work on considering needs like mobility friendliness in the approach to housing. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
I want to say thank you for all the effort that went into it. Obviously, the most comprehensive study we've ever had in this regard, and I like obviously I like the good news. The bad news is not unexpected, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I appreciate the efforts and all the information, which I think will help us going forward. Do we, other members of the commission, do you have questions for staff? Do you want me to go around the table, or do each of you want to just ping me when you're ready? Which works? You're ready? Yeah. All right, Commissioner Skoll.
So in the numbers that you showed in terms of the mix in Wilsonville, the current mix in Wilsonville, I actually saw some other numbers.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Could you just?
I'm sorry.
Make sure it's on. Thank you.
Better? All right, thanks. How does that compare to other communities in the area? Are we on par, are we ahead, behind? What is it? Or do we measure it?
Yeah, I think
Against, say, Tualatin and, Sherwood and other communities?
I think that is an excellent question. I think, as Miranda had mentioned at the beginning, there aren't a lot of other communities in Oregon that do these kinds of comprehensive reports, so I think I haven't been able to find good data on other communities' housing mixes, but that's definitely something we could look at moving forward. I'm not sure it's data I have.
Commissioner Skoll, can I clarify, was that for housing mix?
Yes.
Okay.
And others too. I mean, I've realized that, we're one of the only communities that does this, but Commissioner Willard was in a meeting, I think on Wednesday, that had some other data that was presented by the county that I saw that basically had mixed data in it too, and it bounced it against other communities, and it showed that we were fairly comparable to the surrounding, as compared to the surrounding area. And
Yeah,
some pretty good data.
Yeah, we can actually, I know that information will be coming to this group at your joint meeting with the City Council in July. So there's a joint meeting coming up between the Planning Commission and the City Council work session on your calendar. Okay, we can, at the end of the meeting, we can talk more about that during the informational or announcements or business that's at the tail end. But there's a joint work session coming up between the Planning Commission and the City Council where information on that housing, that's kind of the first component of the Housing Our Future work program, is the housing need and capacity analysis. And so that work that's being done and was presented last week talks a little bit more about how we compare regionally and in the county, and is providing out projection data as well, and not just kind of the past year of activity. And what I can say is, just from the work for the time I've been here, and for the first few years I was doing a lot of this housing report work myself, we have a higher mix of housing than many of our neighbors. So we have more multifamily residential in the city of Wilsonville than any other city in the metro region, except for possibly Portland. I can't remember their percentage. So we have a higher mix in terms of multifamily, middle housing, and single family. Kind of the overall mix that we have is more mixed than some of our neighbors, but not to say that we're like also substantially different than all of our neighbors. So a lot of our neighbors do have similar mixes, especially when it comes to middle housing. I think Beaverton and Hillsborough actually have a little bit more of that than we do at this point in time as a percentage, but they're not, those percentages also aren't substantially different. But as noted, not all of our neighbors are putting this level of data together to know what their kind of full inventory of housing looks like. But more of that information is becoming available now that there's the new state mandates around the housing needs and capacity analyses and the methodology that's being changed and the requirement that they be done every 6 years. And so some of the cities who hadn't done one in a while have already done theirs. And so a lot of this information is now, like, this data is becoming more readily available, and the consultants that are assisting on our project have assisted on the other ones. And so that data is available to them and can be presented.
Good, thank you. Yep.
Commissioner Harrell.
Yeah, Sarah, would you mind going back up to the data for the number of people in households? There was a table there that showed. I want to take a look at that. Yeah, great. Yes. Yeah. So we were fairly consistent on the household, the mix of percentages on 1 person, 2 person, 3 person, 4 person or more households. We haven't varied a whole lot other than 2019. Okay. And then the top one is housing mix by number of bedrooms. Okay. It would be interesting to see for that 2-person household, maybe the 1 person as well, and I don't know if there's the data to support it, what if there's a distribution by age range. You know, I know from my neighborhood and my neighbors, as kids are growing up and leaving the house, the people aren't necessarily leaving their 3-4 bedroom home. So, you know, you have that exodus without necessarily, you know, somebody saying, oh, okay, I'm going to leave and go to a studio or a 1 bedroom.
Exodus, I like that word.
Yeah, so it would be interesting to see that distribution, to see, you know, what kind of population it is that's just choosing to live in a larger house or apartment than what they need.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate that. Thank you. I can definitely see if that's there, if the data's out there.
That's all I got. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I have any additional clarifications?
All right. Commissioner Semenova?
Yes, my question already. So, I was curious about the same information. This is a really great report. Is this story map available for us to go through as well?
Yeah.
Yes, it definitely is.
I saw the print out, but I didn't know if there was a link to go.
Yeah, there should be a link, I think, in the packet, but there's one on the city website as well.
Great, thank you.
I do have a question.
Yes.
Okay, I reserve the right to have another comment. It would be interesting, I'm thinking from a big data perspective, to map onto this interest rates and how much interest rates are affecting some of this. And we're not going to get causation necessarily, but we might get a little bit of correlation there. Because your point about people, the exodus not happening, nobody wants to give up their low interest rates.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. That would be really interesting to look into.
Do we have any comments from the audience? Really? All right. Additional staff. I think that's it. I believe we are done with this agenda item.
Thank you so much.
Weird way to end. All right. Thank you. Next on the agenda is a work session for Frog Pond East and South Implementation Development Code. This work session is a chance for the Planning Commission to gain additional understanding of and provide guidance on ongoing legislative projects prior to a public hearing. As a courtesy, the Planning Commission will, as time permits, allow for limited public comment on the topic after staff has presented their report for the Commission's purpose of continuing to understand the project. However, it should be noted that it is not a public hearing and any participants are encouraged to participate in the future public hearing for legal standing purposes. At this time, I call for city staff to present information they have prepared for the work session. Go ahead, Daniel.
Good evening. So welcome to another work session on Frog Pond East and South Development Code. I think this will likely be a briefer episode, but we will see. So on the agenda tonight is update on housing cost. As part of the master plan, we did an affordable housing analysis, which had quite a bit of data. Now that's a couple years old and there's housing costs have continued to change. So brought forward some new data to really look at where the focus of this master plan is housing, including a focus on some more affordable options. Where are we at? What are we actually looking at as in 2024 numbers, knowing that none of this will get built until we're looking at like 2026, 2027 numbers. And then do some additional follow-up on the continuing to be refined development code package. So if I didn't say it for the record, Dan Pauly's planning manager. I don't think I did. So going back to the master plan, there was really two approaches we talked about as we adopted that master plan. We came to it that any of the these regulatory tools weren't going to get us to truly like 80% or below median family income. That really, the first one is to require some targeted unit types that can provide some different types of needed housing, including some lower cost market options. Generally looking at in 2023, 2024 numbers, this refers to households making between $94,000 and $141,000 roughly. That hopefully some of these different product types can bring that in. The other component is to remove regulatory barriers to development of below market housing that would need additional support from government or nonprofits or other partners. So, and the master plan did that, and this code we're adopting is continuing to implement that, and that's the goal. But what the numbers are, and I do apologize, after publication, I saw that there were some typos in the staff report, more typos than I generally like to see in my staff reports. Particularly in this table where some returns and stuff just kind of got messed up. But here is a corrected table. But looking at this, as consistent with what we said in the master plan, generally the detached homes, you're looking at more than 130% of median family income. Even for a smaller, like 1,500 square foot detached home. So looking more into some of these target unit types, like the townhouses, some of the condos and the ADUs, you are still getting to between that 80 and 120% median family income that really we talked about in the master plan is what we anticipate those housing types to be able to hit. Obviously, if Housing costs continue to escalate. Some of that may even be hard to meet by the time we get to build out in 2028, 2029, when we're building homes during that period. The apartments continue to be a more affordable rental option. This data is showing fairly low percentage. I will note, as is noted in your staff report, that brand new apartments tend to be on the higher end of this, 80 to 90% of median family income. So I will pause there. That's kind of the synopsis, the short synopsis of what we're looking at in terms of housing costs and the sort of housing costs we're looking at delivering with all these policy choices that we're implementing through the master plan and this proposed code. Any questions, comments on this before we get into the code?
Commissioner Heberlein?
Thank you, Chair Carr. Dan, looking at the single-family detached prices, specifically the higher end, the 2,800 to 3,000 square feet, how was that median sale price developed? And I ask because it seems low given what we're seeing for prices in Wilsonville right now.
Well, a lot of the prices you see in your neighborhood are brand new homes as well.
Yep.
So it is that was data taken from a number of real estate listings. This was developed by Eco Northwest. This wasn't my data that I came up with.
So this is a mix of new and existing homes. So this isn't just looking at one type. Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate
so you are correct. The brand new homes that would be built in East and South would be on the high or above this. And that generally goes for all of these. These are looking at existing.
Okay.
Sometimes they concentrate on the last couple decades, but even that is generally going to be lower than the brand new, right? There is a premium on brand new. But we're also, we're building, and when we're talking about housing affordability, we're not just building for that immediate, we're building for long-term affordability as well.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Questions, comments on this? Okay.
Okay.
Next.
So, as you know, there's 82 pages of this stuff. I'm going to focus on kind of the highlights of things that are substantially new or beyond, or kind of bring up new policy concepts that are different than we've talked about before to some extent. I'm not going to go through even things that have changed in terms of, even if the text changed quite a bit, but the policy stayed the same. I won't really touch it. Happy to discuss it if you have any specific questions about it, but I will highlight things where policy's been adjusted a bit. This first one, I'll slow down here because it's a bit convoluted, but hopefully it's simple, is working through, particularly on the commercial Main Street, and this, what is a live-work unit, right? And what's allowed where, because this is and the overall idea here is to meet the intent of providing this commercial space, but provide flexibility where it makes sense for the developer. And live work as a commercial use, as it's been implemented in other projects and kind of we've seen proposed by developers, is generally a flex space where it could be residential or it could be commercial. Generally, during initial development and short to mid-range is going to be primarily residential. Where it's essentially residential, where it has that commercial storefront. It may or may not be physically divided, the actual space. So you may have the front great room that could be a flex space, but then you have all the other residential components. And so because of that it is primarily focused on residential, though, over time it could be converted, things like that is considered residential as a zoning use. I actually was thinking of some prior comments from Commissioner Heberlein when we were talking about detached duplexes and such, the nomenclature, we want to improve over things that are confusing or don't make sense. So we're looking, some jurisdictions that have these sort of differential call these other units work-live units. But we're using the term business integrated dwelling units. So the difference from a live-work is that the differentiation of commercial residential area is fixed. There's a demising wall. It's not flexible, right? You have your business area and your commercial area. Also, the business area is of a size that's clearly the primary, where the residential is secondary. It's fully divided, and because the residential is an accessory use and the dedicated business area can't be used for residential, is considered a commercial use in zoning. Again, both of these you could do commercial, could do storefront, and the interior needs to meet, at least a portion of the interior would need to meet commercial building code. So internally, I've gotten pretty good feedback on this approach to give some flexibility. I'm hoping this differential is making sense with this graphic, but happy to pause and see if there's any questions, comments on this. And essentially how this is implemented on the commercial Main Street is half of the ground floor could be live work, but the other half would either need to be one of the listed uses we'll go through soon, or a listed use with one of these videos.
Questions, comments? You got one, Mr. Heberlein? Nope?
Okay.
I'm just, is the purpose of this delineation to allow developers that are building for future commercial to also gain residential use until the commercial builds out?
No, this would be long-term residential, where really it's where an employee or a proprietor could live. It's the way it's defined. It has to be, you have to actually have a connection, internal connection between the two areas. So you're not just like leasing. The idea is that you wouldn't just lease the residential separately as a developer, but that they would go together.
Okay, thank you.
So building on that, had quite a bit of input, including from the commission about the list of uses, that it may have been too short. And I will note there is another edit from the code. When I accepted all the track changes, it left a blank. So it listed 9 different uses, or 10 different uses rather than 9 here. So that was just a Scrivener error when accepted all the track changes. So essentially what we have here is 8 listed uses. These where these come from is essentially we drew from the allowed uses in town center, which was, the old planned development commercial town center zone had pages and pages of sundries, cells of this and that and the other. We didn't think that was a good approach. That was way too long for this limited approach. And then even Villaball probably their lists got a little long. So looked at it, and the town center seemed the right length, and just looked at anything that obviously didn't make sense from town center in this context, since town center is a larger area and may have like food court, truck pods and things like that. So we ended up with this list of 8, so wanted feedback on this list of 8 makes sense. It includes quite a bit. Any sort of retail, office uses, professional office, services, importantly, child or daycare, that's certainly food or beverage services. That's just definitely something we heard through our outreach that's desired, as well as community service or community centers. Commercial recreation, such as some things that Commissioner Heberlein brought up, would be covered by that. I mean, that's not only like an indoor basketball court, which probably wouldn't fit here, but could be something like an escape room or some experimental service, like recreational thing like that, as well as religious institutions. So, which are generally allowed outright in our commercial areas in the city. So, thoughts, comments on this updated list?
Mr. Heberlein, Commissioner Heberlein.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. I appreciate this this additional work on the allowed uses. I think it makes sense. I think it's a more broad, inclusive list of things that are allowed. So I appreciate it.
Commissioner Semenova.
Yes, I was just curious, what other things were omitted from the list that were not
Like
seen?
it talked about drive-through restaurants and stuff.
Okay, like things that didn't make sense.
Food court pods, right, so that wouldn't be going here.
And that's it?
I mean, I can go back and look and just confirm that
Okay.
as we conclude this, but I don't remember everything. I don't have that code in front of me.
Okay.
Anyone else? Is this an all-inclusive list? So if something that they want to do falls outside of this list, is there a process to allow for it, or is it a solid no?
I mean, you could always put or similar uses, which some of our zones do, but I think this is a pretty inclusive list for what we'd see. I mean, if it's inclusive enough for town center, it's probably inclusive enough for the limited commercial square footage we're dealing with here.
Okay. Yes. Commissioner
Okay, so
Williams.
then let me play that out a little bit. So laundromats, dog grooming, like that, is this broad enough to include services, small businesses like that? Okay.
That would probably be under number 3.
Would that be it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know which one it would be under. Okay.
Okay?
Other comments, questions?
Okay, let's get into the middle of the math. And so something else we did is we went and just kind of did a true up, if you will. And in doing that, after with the insight and kind of understanding we have from demonstration plans that West Hills has done, the Walker Macy's demonstration plan, that we're able to really simplify the method. In short, what the prior method was is kind of looking at the density of different product types and making some assumptions that there's like a preference for detached homes, so that would be maximized first, and then, you know, this would be the next market preference and so on. So there were a lot of assumptions that went into the methodology prior, but which may have been right, may have been wrong. I mean, it was a decent model, but then you ended up, based on the size and things, kind of a fairly wide assumed density in the different areas that had the same urban form. So for example, urban form 1, you had areas that, you know, had a net density from anywhere from around 14 up to 22. And even urban form type 2 from like 10 to like 19. So there was a broad range there. So went to simplify that into kind of one assumed net density for each urban form type, which was looked at make sure it was feasible. 14 and a half is about what it averages out to in this prior method. It's what we've seen in demonstration plans. And it's also a density where it's not high enough that it's going to necessarily trigger multifamily, right? We didn't want to go too high in urban form 1, otherwise by default you start pushing multifamily, which was never, while multifamily is allowed, the intention is to not require it. So an example I'll throw out of what 14 and a half units look at, if you're familiar with Villebois, kind of in the village center, where you have the single family homes that are really close together on a block, that's about 14 and a half units per net acre. So a mix this would still allow for that mix of some detached homes with row houses and possibly multifamily. Urban form 2, 12 and a half, and then urban form type 3, 9, which is higher than what the prior method had, but it was tested. It's still something that allows for the townhouses with still having some larger lots. This really simplified it, and with all that, the table, then 6B was updated. Something that was a question asked by one of the commissioners was why in the table are certain numbers summarized and certain numbers aren't, particularly for those sub-districts, particularly like S3 and S2 and 3, where there's a whole bunch of little lots under it. We give the sum total of the minimum number of units, but we don't sum up like the required middle housing and small units and mobility ready units. So the reason is the summation of the minimum units. We want to show that all adds up to the 1,200. Excuse me, the minimum unit count for the whole project, where the other ones are essentially a product of that number. So there's really not, from policy standpoint, like a summation for the whole project. We will share those summations and findings through adoption. But it doesn't work well to really present it in that table, because oftentimes for a lot of those smaller lots, you only do it if they're combined with a larger lot. So then being able to put that sum there accurately, that could cause confusion. So any questions on this updated methodology or anything about table 6B, which, as you know, is a key piece of this implementation around variety that we're doing.
Questions? You got one?
No questions.
So this updated methodology, net density, will help us achieve at least the minimum, what is it, 1352 or whatever?
1325, yeah.
25. Okay. All right. Yes, Commissioner Heberlein.
Yeah, Mr. Polly, I will say I am in favor of the consolidation and simplification. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Make it easier overall. Okay, thank you.
One other thing that was an important detail that wasn't really reflected in prior code under the public realm component is a gateway at Brisbane, at Southwest Brisbane and Southwest Stafford. So some code has been drafted. It is somewhat discretionary, right? We're going to look at this design later because this is commercially zoned land, so don't have to be as strict in being clear and objective. We tried to be reasonably clear and objective while providing variety. Essentially, in the essence, what it provides, mirroring what's in the master plan, is it needs to be something substantial. We're not talking about like subdivision entry signs. It needs to be something that's a focal point that, you'd want to say, we're going to go meet at the, right? So couple forms based on what the master plan shows us as seen in this image is some sort of sculpture in the roundabout. We're broadening that where it could be that, or it could be like a gateway element on both sides of Brisbane Street that could include like an arch over the street or something like that. So that language was added to balance being clear about what the intent is and what is expected there, but also giving flexibility. And really kind of what we said is it either needs to be professionally designed by someone that has experience, and there's an affidavit of that, similar to the way we approach park design in residential areas, or it needs to be worked through with the and then once that's done, there's a recommendation before DRB approves it from the Arts Committee, since this will be a major kind of piece of public art, if you will. And that's the end of the things I had to highlight. So any questions about any of that or any other component of the updates from the package?
Commissioner Semenova.
Not a question, just a comment. I love that idea. I think it makes a world of difference. There's, over in Happy Valley, Eagle Landing just really stands out at their roundabout with that sculpture, and I think it'll add the special charm
Thank you.
to the community.
Great.
Commissioner Willard, anything?
Come back to me.
Okay.
I'm still searching.
Commissioner Skull, anything?
I do. The potential gateway marker, is that something that you would consider permanent, or is that interchangeable? What's the thoughts behind that?
I think initially it'd be approved as permanent. I mean, it could be, the art will be substantial enough. I don't see it'd be as rotating as some of the smaller sculpture areas in town. So initially it's being contemplated as a permanent installation.
Okay.
Commissioner.
I mean, that could change, but.
And did I read it correctly that the minimum height requirement is 20 feet for that gateway marker?
Yes, I mean, that's subject to change and refinement, but
Okay.
the idea is that you want to provide potential clearance as well as being substantial enough to truly be, a focal point.
Okay.
I don't know for sure it'll end up 20 in the final version, but I'm open to additional feedback on that as.
Okay, yeah, I was struggling with trying to figure out what makes sense, what's enough to be substantial for a gateway marker without, prescribing something unwieldy. I mean, yeah. So I would be interested to see maybe a little more work around giving some flexibility in that.
Yeah.
Commissioner Willard?
No, I don't think, I was looking at block level variety, but I believe we decided last January that was not recommended, and so that's still the case, right?
Yeah, what we found is it really where a lot of that discussion was, which that's an important component of the master plan, right, is it happens without dictating it separately or substantially happens. You may not have multiple unit types within the block, but you're going to have another unit type across the street, right? Or something like that. That it's, by time you put in the other variety requirements, as we've seen demonstration plans and layouts, you're getting substantially to that point without having it as a separate regulation.
Okay.
I like the idea of a gateway, especially for the main street, to make it obvious that they're coming upon something that's not just residential. I do like that. I don't know how far we want to go towards prescribing what it is, but substantial, I understand. I did have one other comment on page 58 of 82, I thought last time we talked about adding the graphics on figure A 8 dot, or 8, figure A-8 from those on figure C-8. We're a little bit more prescriptive as far as what we were looking for on the square pickets and the thickness of the wall.
Right. Right. That is a remaining thing. Okay. Noted.
Other than that, I think I like the work that's been done. Commissioner Heberlein.
Yeah, and Dan, where are we at in the process? How far are we from having a complete set of code and public hearing?
The public hearing is scheduled next month.
Okay, so this is the last time we're going to see it.
Yes.
So this is it. Okay, cool. All right, so one comment based on that. I think that staff has done a great job of trying to thread a very delicate needle of meeting the expectations of Planning Commission, meeting the expectations of council, while also trying to balance the interests and the desires and needs of the developers. And we've seen some of that in the changes here with the commercial center and adding some of that flexibility for the live workspace. So I just wanted to say thank you to the entire team for all the work that you guys have put into this. It's a heck of a long way from where it was when we started 12,000 years ago or whenever it was. So yeah, I think this feels ready. So I appreciate all the work.
Appreciate it. Thank you for all your work. Sat through a lot of meetings on this. Read a lot of pages.
So any other comments or questions for staff? All right.
I will, along the same line that Commissioner Heberlein was just talking about, there are some things we're still finessing. One I'll call out is storm. There's some additional comments and concerns both internally and externally that we've received that I don't think the policy will shift a lot, but I think there's some opportunities for refinement that we're working through. And just making sure that it's clear, objective, predictable, and workable. But the general approach I don't see shifting, but there's still some things there to further refine and just kind of truth test, ground test. Since that component's, it's important, but it's fairly complex when you start actually engineering the stormwater on the ground. So appreciate our partners as we continue to work through that, both internally and externally. And there's a few other things, just clarifying language and things like that, we have our external partners continuing to work through it. We are going to, it's posted on Let's Talk, so expect even additional external partners, possibly some comments as that hits mailboxes and that link's provided to provide comment prior to the public hearing. So I just want to make sure, as we've talked about this over 12,000 years, and really refine it. This is how the process works, is we do a lot of work and get it very far along working with Planning Commission. But saying that, I just want to be clear, it's not set in stone at this point, right? So as we get additional comments over the next 2 months, there will still be some finessing. I don't anticipate major structural or policy shifts, but there will be refinements. And welcome those continued input, both from the commission and from the public, as we land this jumbo jet. So, so that is all I have.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Pally.
And I will go look that up to see real quick. As we wrap up, I'll look at, it'll just take me a moment to bring up on my computer over there what the complete list of uses in town center are compared to, so just give me a moment for that while you hear other testimony.
Excellent. Thank you. Time does permit the commission to take public comment on this work session item. The commission asks the public comment be brief and specific to aspects of the project under discussion tonight as presented in the packet material and not general in nature or on components of the project not the subject of tonight's work session. As you are given an opportunity to comment either in person or via Zoom, please state your name and address or state that your address is provided on the testimony card. Then present any comment you would like to the Planning Commission regarding the matter before them. Please do your best to speak clearly and directly into the microphone so other participants are sure to hear your comments. After each participant's comments, I will ask the Planning Commission if they have any questions for the speaker. Do we have any in Zoom?
I currently have 0 hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, perfect. Members of the audience. Who wants to go first? Mimi or Dan? All right, Mimi.
Good evening, everybody. I think you know who I am, but I'm Mimi Dukas. I'm with AKS Engineering here on behalf of West Hills. We are also happy to see this moving forward and landing the jumbo jet. As staff pointed out, there are a few refinements that we're still working through with staff. We continue to have those conversations. So most of my testimony tonight is talking through the things that we're still working on behind the scenes, just so you're aware of it. Number one, as staff pointed out, the stormwater implications, we want to make sure that the densities that are planned for within the master plan are realistically able to be achieved in combination with the stormwater standards. So we've done some work on what stormwater improvements would look like for the Azar property. We're trying to get confirmation that we've got the right approach for stormwater, that there's not additional requirements that are needed that would affect density. I think that's an important daylighting piece of how the code will be implemented. So we're working through that. We're also working through subdistrict number 4, which is where the main street is located. There are, for a subdistrict of that size, it would typically require 3 different product types. Because the commercial land is netted out of that area, we may only be required 2. We're not quite clear on the boundaries of that, so we're still working through that component, which is more in our court than yours. The live-work units, staff has worked on some propositions for that. The commercial component for this area will be one of the trickiest pieces of real estate. Commercial real estate's very finicky. It really wants the rooftops before there's any real customer base for that retail. So the timing is kind of the opposite of what you want it to be. You'd love to have that retail as a gateway element. You come into the community and ta-da, there's nice, beautiful buildings. The retailers, the tenants aren't ready yet. There's no customers yet. So with the 50% frontage requirement of retail, the live-work concept, that flexible space that could be residential in the short term and convertible to commercial long-term, architecturally, building code, those components built to commercial standards, so it's fully convertible, but allowing some version of revenue in the short term until the retailers are ready is very important. So staff has put some code forward. I don't think that quite gets us there, but that is one of the components that we're still working through with staff. There's a lot of competing interests trying to sort through how we find the middle ground on that. And then finally on that gateway element, we're fully aware we need to do a gateway at the roundabout area. 20 feet is really, really tall. I don't know what that standard will be, but just for the record, 20 feet's really tall for a gateway element. So hopefully we'll figure out something else for that. So that is what I wanted to share with you tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions for Mimi? Yes.
Just a comment, I don't know if that's towards you or Daniel. When the development of the live work spaces is happening, I've seen some of those spaces in downtown Sherwood and other locations. And so are you guys gathering input from people who moved into those spaces about what works, what doesn't? Or is you already have the floor plans and you already know what you're going to do?
So it's a concept, the live work units is a concept that has been tested out in a few different places, and Dan can speak to this in more detail. Dan Grimberg, West Hills has built many of these types of units throughout the city of Portland, which is probably your best test case market. It's still a tricky thing. So he can give you more feedback on how they evolve over time and that how that process works. And the live work units we've seen lease up and fill storefronts in the short term. So we've seen that in Witch Hazel in Hillsborough. We've seen it in the Bethany region. There's several areas that have done that. So that's been tested. I think staff has concerns that tends to want to stay residential. So you end up with, an insurance agent who lives in the house and simply has a front office for a long period of time. This is a little different. The commercial construction costs for building out those units is really substantial. So there's a high motivation to be able to get actual commercial rents out of those buildings. So there's a market incentive to get those converted when you can. But it at least gets some revenue moving. They're a loss leader in the short term, but ultimately, at least it's something instead of nothing. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Well, just, Mimi, last time we talked about this, you had some concerns about not being able to meet the rules, middle housing or the varieties or the mobility friendly. So you've been able to work out all those details with the staff, is what I'm hearing now?
We've had a lot of conversations with staff. What they've introduced is some ability to blur across the districts if you've got direct adjacency for the mobility for the small units. A little bit of flexibility is all we needed, and with that adjacency requirement, we can finally check the box. So we've gone through the table many times trying to check the boxes and check more boxes, and we're pretty close. It's just that sub-district 4 that we're trying to put the last check mark on. Okay. But thank you for asking.
Anything else? All right. Thanks, Mimi.
Thank you.
Mr. Grimberg?
Good evening, Chair Carr and Commissioners. First of all, I want to thank you for all the many days and hours you've spent on this planning and staff also. It's been an experience. Some of it's been fun and some of it hasn't been. But anyway, we're all in it together and we want to be part of it. We want it to be successful. And we're getting to this point, the way we look at it, it's been a planning exercise, right? Here's all these ideas. What are we going to do? Here's the plan. And it's kind of melded into what it is today. And now we have to make it work. And we're not, in my opinion, in our company's opinion, we're not there yet. There's some, the variety that's being required here is basically unprecedented, and we're trying to make it work. That's all I can say is we're trying to make it work. We're planning to build housing product that we have not built before. No one has built it before. ADUs on a widespread basis hasn't been done. These mobility-friendly units in this kind of numbers has not been done, and that all affects the value, right? So we're trying to make it work. So I just want want you to know we're trying. We do have some concerns. Mimi mentioned about the stormwater code. We're not getting clear answers. And I'm not blaming the people that are here tonight, but we have submitted plans and we are not getting feedback whether they meet the code. And the plan that we've submitted, we believe does meet the code. The fact that we're not getting confirmation back makes you wonder, and we're just not getting any comments back. So the reason I bring that up is that could significantly impact the density of development on the sites. And if it affects the density on the sites, it's also going to affect the variety. In the code, there's tables that have certain minimum unit types per sub-district. Those will all be impacted if, depending on the stormwater code interpretation. And again, you're going to be asked in July, I guess it's July 10th, to approve this development code. And it's like, we need to have all the pieces. I'm very concerned that the code gets approved with these different requirements and it may not be able to be implemented because of the stormwater code. So I would ask you to please look into that with the staff. Please make sure it works. We just are not getting feedback on that. I'd also like to talk about the live work. I understand that there's a desire to have committed retail in the Frog Pond East area along Main Street on Brisbane. If it wasn't a problem, I wouldn't bring it up, but it's a problem. There is not a good market for retail commercial in that area. Our plan initially was to develop that area first of the Azar property. It's off of Stafford Road, the main road there, Brisbane, but there's no market. And the reality of it is the commercial retail is on the main floor of a full 4-story building. So if that building is built and that space is vacant because there's no market, it doesn't work, and developers have to be prudent in their investments. And so if that's not a reasonable, well-rooted component, the residential above is not going to get built. And that's a significant amount of units. Those are elevator served because it's a 4-story building that provides some of the more affordable housing in the development. It provides mobility-friendly units in the development. It's a key component, and we would ask for more flexibility rather than being strict on the committed retail, which is not realistic in our opinion, in our consultants, and we don't present a consultant's report that disagrees with your consultant's report. I mean, that doesn't do anybody any good. But we all know on the development side that it's not a good commercial retail market there. We've been told by experienced consultants that the rents for that type of space in that area, if you can get somebody, would be in the neighborhood of $15 to $20 a square foot. And in order to have a financially feasible project, you need to be charging rents in the $35 a square foot. So if you can't make it work financially, it's not going to get built. So you don't get the retail commercial, and you're not going to get the residential component above. I'm not saying that as a threat. We want it to work. We want to build the buildings. That's where we'd like to start. But because of that requirement, we're going to have to hope that something works out eventually, which is not what you want, right? You want that build up front. It's just not going to happen. So we would ask that the live work be allowed as initial startup, because what's going to go in there initially is small businesses that are getting started where they have a residential component that they live in, and then they have a great room that they can operate their business out of. That's how these spaces work. And I think I mentioned this last month, and this is my last remark, is the city of Portland on these same types of buildings, what they have a package of code that they have removed from their requirements, and one of them is on these multifamily buildings that they have removed the requirement for an active street-facing facade because of the marketability problem. You can drive through Alberta, MLK, all these major streets in the city of Portland, and you'll see a lot of just open glass, right? It sounds good. Everybody thought it was the hot deal. It's not. These small businesses struggle. Big retail is struggling. Restaurants are struggling. It's a tough business. And to just think that because we put it on a map, it's going to happen, we're very concerned about that. And we would ask for the understanding of that situation and allowing live work, which is that is doable, and we can make that work. So thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Wait, I have a question.
Oh. Commissioner Wheeler?
So I'm going back to your concern about with the stormwater and not having confidence that you can meet the density of the development. And I'm remembering back to the great printouts that Mimi would bring us in the past. I don't have one in front of me, but I recall that your planned density was significantly higher than the stated density in the plan. So your concern is meeting your density, not the stated. We'll still be able to meet the what's in the code, as I understand it. And so correct me if that's wrong.
I do not believe that's correct. There's one sub-district, I think, where we may have exceeded the minimum density, which would be sub-district 4, which that would allow either apartments or townhomes, right? And so we have one plan that shows multifamily apartment buildings, 3-story walk-up apartments along Stafford, meeting all the design requirements. And then we have an alternate plan that shows townhomes there. So in that case, that would be, that sub-district, I guess, would exceed the minimum, but the other districts, we wouldn't hit the minimums. And that's what got our attention was some of these tables changed last month because of the concern that the stormwater was going to have a larger impact than what was originally planned for. I think originally, and Dan can correct this, but I think it was in the 5 to 7% range, and they then increased that to the 10% impact range, and that then required that they put more density in the higher density urban form areas. And so that's complicated. Then like, wait a minute, we still don't have the answer on the stormwater code. 5%, 7%, 10%. Some initial analysis that our engineers did, depending on the interpretation of that code, and one of them is that we've been told that they want distributed small ponds for water treatment, right? And so that's one approach. We work in other areas, they had small ponds and saw that didn't work, so they went to larger ponds. And so there's no magic to this, right? And so, but those kinds of decisions affect what can be developed. And so if it went to this distributed pond approach, which no pond can be greater than 20% of the, the drainage basin, that could impact density by 10 to 15%. Those are big numbers. And what the simple example I would give, if you have 350 units, which that's what we have between townhomes and single family, roughly, and then we have about 300 apartments. But if you just on the single family and the townhomes, 10% of that is 35. They have an average value of, just for round figuring, 200,000. That's $7 million loss of value. That's got to be spread across the other remaining homes. So it increases the price of the homes that you do have left. I don't think that's what anybody here wants to do. I think we need to come up with a reasonable stormwater approach that treats the water but doesn't impact the development area, right? That would be ideal. And we believe it can be done, but we're not, we've submitted our interpretation of that plan, but we're not getting feedback. And I only bring that up because I'm concerned, because here we are tonight, this is wrapping up. July 10th, you're going to be asked to, I understand, vote on approving this code, and we don't know if it can work because of stormwater, and we don't know if it can work because of live work. I mean, those are basic issues that need to be answered before the code gets adopted, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Heberlein.
We're not done with you quite yet. One more time.
Thanks for not throwing me out.
Hey, well, yeah, I did want to say to Mimi and Dan, thank you both for your participation in this. You've provided a valuable set of knowledge and information that has helped at least myself through this process and being able to see a bigger picture and get a little better perspective on everything. So I really do appreciate all the time that you both have spent here with us this entire 12,000 years. So yeah, thank you. Okay, so stormwater, Dan, your concern is more with loss of value of the developable area than unit requirements, the number of units that you have to build, correct?
Well, it's both.
Both? So then...
Loss of value is big,
okay,
obviously, because that affects what we have to sell a house for, right? The cost of the land is X.
Yeah.
You have to spread that across the number of units. If the cost has to be spread over less units, those units are more expensive than if there's more units. I mean, that's the general idea,
yeah.
right?
So then the other part of that, sorry, go ahead.
To answer the question, and then the variety, we are very concerned about that because there's variety requirements, but there's minimum unit mix, unit types, like there's so many middle housing units in that sub-district. There's so many mobility-friendly units in that district. Well, if you shrink the number of units, that's going to affect our ability to produce. You know, we have to have a good variety, and if you're shrinking the numbers, but you're still sticking to the minimum per unit type, it's not going to add up.
So this may be where a clarification for Mr. Pauly. If the stormwater ends up being larger than expected, that reduces your net developable area, which then reduces the overall number of required units for all of the unit types. Correct. So it's a math problem. So, and that's where I guess I'm asking you, have you guys factored that into the concern? Because from my side, I completely get the loss of value side. I'm not sure on the other half of it, because your net developable area goes down, that also reduces the required number of units of those different types.
Yeah, and we don't know what to count on. So I don't, yeah, I appreciate what you're saying. It does affect the value. It is going to be able to do less units. That allows us to, I guess, meet the code.
Yeah.
It doesn't make a financially feasible development. And I think that is our major concern is, you know, we've all invested a lot of time and effort on this and money and a lot of things. And it's like, we want a successful community. And some of these things are affecting the financial feasibility, that's huge. Without financial feasibility, it can't happen. And we want to produce all the different housing types you want. I mean, we want to do it, but it's got to be financially feasible. And so we need some help on the stormwater. We need some help on the live work. And if we could get those couple of items, I think we got a good program. But without that, I don't know what's going to happen. There's been days where we just think, that's it, we're done. And we don't want to be done. We want to build it.
Yeah, we appreciate that. Dan, Pauly, I guess a question on the live work side. Has there been any discussion or contemplation around a defined time frame for allowing that use, you know, to give that flexibility in the early years, say years 1 through 5, but then allow that or have that sunset as the development grows or as time goes on, to where you only have that for a defined period of time?
There has not.
Okay. I don't know if it's practical, but maybe it's something to to think about to see if there is some middle ground we can try to find to make things pencil out.
I think it's a great question, Commissioner Heberlein. I would note that it gets tricky because once you have people living in those residential units, you're then essentially creating some edict that forces them to either create a workspace that becomes retail or commercial or, serving the community in some way, open to the public, or you're evicting them to then require that conversion. So this is the struggle in terms of, and the city having really no control within that system once something is built and managed by a management company and the property owner who owns that property. I'm not sure how that would be practical unless there was something, I guess, within a development agreement that then put it within the deed restriction. But again, you're dealing with real people living in those units at that point in time, and it's not really something the city has traditionally done or wants to probably do to people. I think this is one of the things that we often struggle with because the long-term vision and master plan, even from the area plan back to the area plan that was adopted, not just the master plan, but the concept plan that preceded it, was for a commercial area. And that has now become a mixed use buildings on something more designed like a Main Street to integrate residential units into that space as well. And we've now been discussing allowing 50% of that frontage to be live work. It would be designed to have that kind of public realm frontage. When reading through the standards, you'll note that there's the front entrances are on that Main Street. There's the coverings, there's that accessibility from the street. But there's no requirement within a live work situation that there actually be that work component. Some folks may not use that front space to have a photography studio or an office or, whatever it is that they're doing. So even though it's designed that way for the long-term potential for it to be used that way, there's really no guarantee, and I'm not sure that we have the ability to have that type of guarantee without it being potentially messy. We could look into it and see if any other jurisdictions have done something like that, and see if there is a creative consideration there. We're absolutely willing to think outside the box. I think we just want to be careful when it gets into, our residents in our community. And
yeah, I completely appreciate that. I think that as long as it was known up front that it's less challenging than if it was just somebody was surprised by it, at the end, where they thought, oh, they could live here forever, and then they get told 5 years later, time's up. So yeah, it would be interesting to at least do a little look to see if there are any mechanisms, even if it's not that, to maybe allow that flexibility early on.
Yeah, overall, I just kind of worry about the commercial requirement because there's a lot of struggling commercial real estate, especially in a post-COVID world. And even things that used to be in person between therapy and those are all virtual. And so I think we need to make sure that we're putting in there what we know about commercial real estate now, post-COVID.
Got it. Thank you. Yes, Dan and Mimi, thank you also for your long and patient participation in this process. Any other comments from the audience?
I could answer that question about uses real quick when the time's appropriate.
Yes, Mr. Pally.
So the town center uses that were excluded, one is multifamily because it's by reference just above that. Playgrounds, public and private parks, right? I mean, particularly because that list of uses specifically refers to buildings. So that doesn't make sense. And then also food carts and food cart pods, which, would be, there's just not space for it, right? conceptually, they could be parked on the street just like anywhere else in the city temporarily, or be a temporary use in the parking lot, but, as actually part of the commercial storefront, I mean, it doesn't.
That makes sense. Okay, thank you for that. Any other final comments or questions for staff on this work session? Yes.
I just have one as I think through it. So it'll be pedestrian areas, and will these commercial spaces be allowed, say, to operate out of a window? I don't know.
Like a walk-up?
Yeah, like a walk-up, yeah.
Yeah, you could have a walk-up window.
It will allow that?
You have like a bank that has an ATM.
Or like
Yeah.
Or, a coffee shop or.
Oh, so you want a coffee shop, is that what you're saying? Put coffee shops number one on the list.
Just like, a walk-up lunch place sort of thing, yeah.
Okay.
Dry cleaning, drop, I don't know. Just curious if it would. Thank you.
Very good. Okay. No further discussion. That concludes this work session. So now we're on to the informational section. Next on the agenda is the informational item, City Council action minutes and a 2024 PC work program. A chance for us to learn more about specific topics. Anything from staff?
Yeah, so let's talk July.
Let's talk July.
So August, your meeting is canceled.
Canceled.
But July, you get a double dose.
Okay.
So you have Monday, July, is it the
15th is what's on the calendar.
Yes, is a joint work session with City Council. That is at 5, so it's a little earlier. So I want to mention that, make sure that you're aware of that. That should be great, a very interesting meeting, talking about housing with your counselors and with the consultants on housing our future.
Will that session be virtual or in person?
It will be in person here at council chambers.
Then you do have your regular meeting on the 10th. Since it's close to a holiday in summertime, I know we have at least one commissioner that's excused already. Just want to make sure we're going to have quorum that day. Is there anyone else that knows they're going to be out on July 10th? Yeah, and so that's right, we're already down 2. So
I should be here.
Okay.
I should be here.
I will be, yeah.
Okay, just need 4. It's a quorum, so. Okay. Thank you. Anything?
Do you want to talk a little bit more about the purpose of that meeting?
On the 15th?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is really a presentation about what strategies and about the whole, didn't have my talking points really together.
I think I can, it's okay. You've done a lot tonight, so I'll try to take this one. I recently met with Kim, senior planner, Ms. Reibold, who's project managing it. We talked a little bit about the upcoming meeting. So that meeting, it'll be a part of the council work session. It'll take up an hour of that work session. The intent is really for all of you to be briefed at the same time about the initial results of the housing need and housing capacity analysis, so that you're all kind of getting that information all at once. And also for you to be thinking about that information as it potentially relates to then the meatier topic of what we'll be working through over the next year, which is identifying housing production strategies that we will then work on for the next 6 years until we do this process again. So really, as you know, within 6 years, especially if it's a large policy change or something else we're trying to implement, that stuff can take time. So inherently, what may happen is there might be a lot of ideas for a lot of strategies, but we're gonna at some point have to kind of prioritize those as well. So I think part of the discussion will also be getting you thinking about the need and capacity and thinking about what are key things that you're hearing within that you might want to have strategies be addressing. So you might want to be hearing the information saying, okay, these are some key findings that we think are really important for Wilsonville, or that we're concerned about, or that we care about. And as we get into the next phase of this work of thinking about housing production strategies, let's talk about, can staff and the consultant bring back strategies that would address those specific things that we're hearing. And so that might give you guys an opportunity to work through some of that with the council.
Is that meeting going to be recorded? I'm not going to be in town for that, so.
It most likely will, because all of the work sessions of the council are on YouTube and recorded and can be viewed after the fact.
Okay.
If there, we typically have done all one way, but if it needed to be hybrid, we could discuss with city manager and council. It may be a situation in which you cannot do that either, but I'm just putting that out there that we could potentially have that discussion with the clerk if needed.
And that's a Monday, right?
Yeah. But the intent is for us to all be around, for all of you to be around the dais. It's gonna be cozy.
Cozy, yeah.
All right, I think that's it. We have completed all scheduled agenda items. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
And the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.